Okay, when we last left off, we were talking about what a polar body was. Real quick, sperm, when you're producing a sperm cell, here it's showing you that secondary spermatocyte divides. Those two will divide in order to form these 4 haploid spermatids. But remember, we said the spermatids are not functional. They have to undergo spermiogenesis. Well, with the secondary oocyte that's being released, it's again by unequal cytokinesis. So here's that first polar body. It says when this guy is fertilized, then it will undergo the second division, and here is that other polar body being released, and then this shows you those 2 cells actually being released, and then here's our ovum or egg. Okay, alrighty. So the ovarian cycle. The ovarian cycle is controlled by those gonadotropic hormones, the follicle-stimulating hormone, the luteinizing hormone. The follicle-stimulating hormone, we know, is going to be responsible for helping to bring those immature follicles to maturity. The luteinizing hormone, this hormone is going to be basically carry a couple roles. One, taking the remainder of that ovulated follicle and forming a corpus luteum. Number 2, also be involved in the ovulation process itself. Same thing with these hormones. Remember, the gonadotropic releasing hormones are released by the hypothalamus because they have ultimate control. Those releasing hormones in turn cause the pituitary gland to release the gonadotropic hormones again, which are FSH and LH. It says that these hormones are being secreted at different rates, and we want to look at those rates and what's going on with the uterine as well as the uterine cycle. Okay, it says the hormones of the menstrual cycle, they help to time and regulate the events of oogenesis. Remember, we said oogenesis had to be tied to the menstrual uterine cycle. We know that the average menstrual cycle is around 28 days. So we want to begin by talking about days 1 through 5. Days 1 through 5, we know that all of the female sex hormones are pretty low at this point. The progesterone, low. Estrogen, low. Follicle-stimulating hormone on the rise. Luteinizing hormone, low. All right. So it says at this point, it says the endometrium is going to disintegrate or break down. The blood vessels are going to rupture that were formed, that were once tried to create this hospitable, wonderfully nourished environment for a developing fetus, you could say, eventually. So let's look at this. So then the follicle-stimulating hormone is starting to rise. Okay, so we said days 1 through 5, menses is occurring, MENSES. Okay, but days 1 through 5, the other thing that's happening is that this follicle-stimulating hormone is on the rise. So if the follicle-stimulating hormone is on the rise, it says we're starting this whole thing all over again. We want to make sure that we are now bringing these follicles to maturity, because one of them will hopefully be fertilized, okay, and will bring forth new life. All right, so it says this hormone is responsible for stimulating the early growth and development of those primordial or immature follicles. It says one of the other things, if you remember, we said when these follicles begin to mature, they begin producing estrogen. So look at the concentrations of estrogen shown in purple. It says they are rising. So days 6 through 13, what's happening? Estrogen is released by that developing follicle. So what does estrogen do to the uterus? It says estrogen stimulates the regrowth of the endometrium, which is the inner lining of the uterus. So estrogen stimulates the regrowth of the endometrium. But estrogen also does something else. It inhibits the release of the follicle-stimulating hormone. Why? Because you only want to bring a few of these follicles towards maturity. Remember, we're going to choose the best one. Well, we don't choose. It just happens. But the fittest of those guys gets chosen. But it says the follicle stimulating hormone is inhibited by estrogen. If you remember, estrogen is a form of birth control, okay? So, a woman doesn't want to deliver a litter of babies. She wants one, okay? So the endometrium will also thicken because of the estrogen, and it will begin becoming vascular again, as well as glandular, okay? The other thing that's going to happen, it says day 6 through 13. The estrogen surge will stimulate the release of the luteinizing hormone. Remember, the luteinizing hormone is going to be important because it's going to be responsible for helping to cause ovulation. So, in other words, we're talking about the expulsion of the secondary oocyte from the most mature follicle, which is the Graafian follicle, which will occur about the 14th day from the end of the cycle. The other thing that's going to happen with that luteinizing hormone, once the follicle has ovulated, okay, here's that ovulation occurring, it says that the luteinizing hormone will cause the remainder of this follicle to develop in what we call the corpus luteum, okay? So, it says around the 14th day from the end of the cycle is when ovulation will actually take place. And we said it is because of the surge of the luteinizing hormone along with the estrogen. Now, we talked about the corpus luteum being developed from under the control of the luteinizing hormone, and it came originally from the remainder of the ovulated follicle. So what does the corpus luteum do? Why is it important that we have the corpus luteum? Well, the corpus luteum are going to be responsible for producing lots of hormones that are going to be needed to make this wonderfully nourished, controlled, as far as the muscle contractions environment for a embryo to actually implant in the uterine wall. Okay, so we're going to have increased progesterone produced by the corpus luteum. One of the things that we want to say, progesterone's job is to help quieten the myometrium, so the muscular contractions that were taking place, well, the progesterone will help to quieten the myometrium. Progesterone is also used in birth control pills, so we'll see what else progesterone does. Number one, causing the endometrium to double in size. Number two, causing the uterine glands that were developing in days 6 through 13 to become to maturity. Also, a big thing as far as birth control, inhibiting that ovulating effect of the luteinizing hormone. Okay, inhibits the ovulating effect of the luteinizing hormone. More things that we can see. We know producing this thick, nourishing secretion again. Very important in the first trimester, having the ovary with the corpus luteum, because it's going to be responsible for producing all those hormones which are necessary to maintain this pregnancy early on before the placenta is fully developed. So source of hormones in that first trimester of pregnancy. So again, supporting pregnancy until the placenta is fully developed. So if you happen to have something go wrong, let's say you end up with cancer of your ovaries and they have to be removed prior to this first trimester, that's gonna bring about a few difficulties, especially if it's unknown. Alright, so if no pregnancy takes place during days 15 through 28, it says, if no embryo is conceived during the cycle, the levels of estrogen and progesterone, they will decline as the corpus luteum deteriorates and becomes the corpus albicans. Okay? Without progesterone, we know that the endometrium is going to be shed in a new cycle. It's going to start, okay? It says, I'm going to try to grab a green thing. So here we go. New cycle. It's going to start again. We're going to start all over without progesterone. Number 2, we said without estrogen, it says what's going to happen. If estrogen levels are declining, we know that what levels are inclining. Follicle stimulating hormone is inclining. Okay? So it says a new menstrual cycle will begin. Okay, what if there is a pregnancy? If an embryo is conceived, then the levels of estrogen, luteinizing hormone, and progesterone, they do not decline. Says the corpus luteum will then be maintained intact by who? The human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, which is going to be coming from the placenta. Okay? Until, why? We said in that first trimester we needed to maintain the corpus luteum because it is responsible for producing all of those hormones that are going to be necessary for maintaining the pregnancy. Remember, HCG is one of the hormones that is measured very early on in pregnancy. So if you go buy one of those tests off the shelf, then most likely this is the hormone that you're looking for. I really do. Let's end there, and then we'll do the last set of slides, all talking about birth control. Thank you very much. Hope you have a wonderful day.